What if I told you that the laughter of a boy chasing fireflies in the village night would one day echo through the crowded streets of Ibadan? That the dust of the market, the ripples of the stream, and the wisdom of an old grandmother would shape the destiny of a man? This is not just the story of a boy. It is the story of every child who dares to dream beyond the walls of their village. The story begins in the heart of a small village called Izumaki, where the sun kissed the red earth and the nights were alive with the crackling voice of fire. Obong was a young boy with vibrant energy and was raised by his grandmother. Mama Obong, a woman whose back was bent, but whose spirit stood taller than the tallest palm tree. Her face was a map of wrinkles, each line a story. Her voice carried the weight of old songs, and her hands, always smelling of palm oil and smoke, held the boy's tiny fingers with care. Every morning, before the cock crowed twice, she would wake Obong. Obong, stand up. The day will not wait for a sleepy child, she would say, and Obong would rub his eyes, pick up the broom made from palm fronds, and sweep the sandy compound, making neat patterns that danced like waves. After chores, Mama Akit would prepare their breakfast, yam with palm oil, or sometimes just soaked gari with groundnuts and palm kernel. And while they ate, she never failed to slip in one of her proverbs. My son, a child who knows how to wash his hands will dine with elders. Learn this early. By midday, they would head to the market. The market was alive, women shouting prices, traders clapping to attract customers, goats bleating as they tugged at their ropes, and the smell of roasted plantain mixing with dried fish. Obong would sit behind his grandmother's stall, helping her sell palm oil and pepper. But sometimes he would sneak roasted groundnuts into his pocket, chewing happily while pretending to be serious. You this boy, his grandmother would scold, swatting him gently. You will eat all our profit one day. And everyone around would laugh. At the market, Obong learned how to count coins, how to greet elders with respect, and how to observe people's skills that would stay with him all his life. In the evenings, children from the village would go to the stream. The girls balanced clay pots on their heads with such grace, it was as if the water feared to spill. The boys were wild, splashing water, wrestling and laughing. One day, while trying to impress the others with a backflip, Obong lost his balance, slipped on a wet rock and fell flat into the water. Everyone laughed until their stomachs hurt, and he too, soaked and shivering, laughed with them. An elder passing by shook his head. Ye Chen, children of nowadays, don't whistle at the stream, or the spirits will answer you. The children froze for a moment, then burst into giggles and ran off. Obong had spent most of his holiday helping his grandmother at the market, going swimming with his friends, setting traps for squirrels and bush meats in the farm. He even began to play football, which happened to be his favorite sport. Sometimes Obong and his grandmother would go to Mama Ngozi's shop to buy things he will need when he resumed secondary school bit by bit. Things like new school bag, new books, pen, and even math set. His grandmother would often say, "Slow and steady wins the race. The house we live in started with a foundation before it got to the rafter, so there's no need to rush." Obong would reply with a nod and a green gesture to assure his grandmother that he understood what she meant. Obong loved the holidays because he was free from assignments, tests and exams, but school is resuming on Monday and it's already Sunday night. His grandmother will be telling a story by the fire tonight. Every child in his neighborhood enjoyed Grandma's stories. Some would even sneak out of their huts just so they can listen to Obong's grandmother's stories. Grandma tells beautiful stories this night, and I begin secondary school tomorrow. What a lovely way to end the holiday, he said to himself with a smile of a cheerful hope on his face. Nighttime was Obong's favorite. When the moon was fat and full, the whole compound gathered around the fire. The fire crackled, sparks flying into the night sky, and the old woman would begin. Long, long ago, when animals still talked, she told them stories of Tortoise the trickster, of why the dog and the leopard became enemies, of the greedy hyena who lost his tail. Her voice dropped low when danger came in the tale, and the children leaned closer, wide-eyed. Then her voice would rise in laughter, and everyone clapped. The children's imagination soared. Obong dreamed of being a hero, of traveling beyond the village, of writing his own story one day. And as the fire dimmed, Mama Keat would always end with a warning. My children, the world is wide, but do not forget where your umbilical cord is buried. That night, Obong barely slept all through the night, as thoughts of secondary school life lingered on his mind. All these thoughts made him wish he could turn night to morning. Every child must grow, and as the seasons passed, the boy who once chased fireflies in the village night found himself wearing a faded school uniform, carrying books whose pages smelled of chalk and dust. Childhood laughter gave way to teenage dreams, and in those dreams there was a girl. But let me not rush. Came the morning alarm by Mama Emika's cock. It was morning already, so Obong got up filled with so much life and started preparing for his new chapter in the village secondary school. Obong's first day at the village secondary school was one he never forgot. The building stood like a proud giant of mud bricks, its zinc roof glinting under the sun. The classrooms echoed with the chatter of children, some barefoot, some in worn sandals, all buzzing like restless bees. Obong sat nervously, his uniform stiff, his exercise books new. Teachers came in one by one, some strict, some kind, others who carried long canes that whistled through the air the smallest mistake. And yet, Obong shone. He answered questions. He read aloud with confidence. Slowly, his classmates began to notice him. But what he noticed most was her. She was not the most beautiful girl in the school, no, but there was something about her laughter. When she laughed, it rang out like the bell at the chapel nearby. It was impossible not to hear, it was impossible not to feel. Her name was Amaka. She had eyes that danced when she spoke, and a way of tucking her hair behind her ear whenever she was shy. Obong admired her from a distance. He walked behind her after school, never beside her. He wrote letters in the back of his exercise book, letters filled with clumsy poems and borrowed proverbs, but he never gave them. At night, by the fireside, while his grandmother told stories, his mind wandered. He imagined himself a brave hunter saving a maiden. He imagined Ada smiling at him the way she smiled at her friends. Secondary school life was not only about books. Mischief flowed like palm wine. There was the time he and his friends sneaked out of class to pluck mangoes from the chief's compound. They were caught, and the punishment, to kneel under the sun with their hands raised until their arms trembled. There was the inter-house sports day, where he ran barefoot in the 100 meters race, dust flying behind him. The whole village cheered as he won, panting but triumphant. Even Amaka clapped, and for that moment, it felt as though the world had given him a crown. And then there were the teachers, one in particular, Mr. Okoro, who believed the cane was sharper than any pen. Obong often felt the sting of that cane for arriving late, especially on market days when he had to help his grandmother before school. Still, through it all, laughter never left him. He was full of stories, full of jokes, full of dreams. Though shy, he and Ada grew into a quiet companionship after school. When groups of children walked home together, he would walk behind her group, listening to her laughter. Sometimes their eyes met, and in that brief silence, entire conversations were spoken without words. One day, after an exam, she walked up to him and said,
"You are always first in class. You will go far."
Those simple words planted something in his heart, not just affection, ambition. But this dream came with a price. He began to spend less time laughing by the stream, less time listening at the fireside, less time noticing the girl with laughter like a bell. But this dream came with a price. He began to spend less time laughing by the stream, less time listening at the fireside, less time noticing the girl with laughter like a bell. And Amaka, she waited, she watched, she wondered if his silence meant he had forgotten her. A boy who once chased fireflies in the night. He had laughed at the stream, sold pepper in the market, and stolen glances at a girl whose laughter was like a bell. But now his eyes were fixed on a bigger horizon. His results had come, he had passed, and the city of Ibadan awaited him. But leaving the village was not just a journey on a bus. It was a journey of the heart. The morning he left, the entire compound gathered. The chickens clucked as if they too knew a departure was happening. Obong's grandmother stood tall despite her years, her wrapper tied firmly, her eyes wet but proud. She pressed a small leather bag into his hands. Inside was gari, groundnut, and a little money tied in cloth. "Obong, listen to me," she said, her voice trembling. "The city is wide. It will test you, but remember, a river that forgets its source will run dry. Do not forget us. Do not forget yourself." Obong nodded, fighting tears. Around him, neighbors clapped him on the back, wishing him well. Some whispered, "He will make it. He will come back a doctor, or maybe a lawyer." Others said, let the city not swallow him. And then, as the old bus horned outside, his grandmother pulled him into her arms. Go, my son. Go and see the world, but remember the fire that raised you. The bus was an old, rattling machine, painted in faded blue and yellow. Its seats were torn, its windows rattled, but to the boy, it was a chariot. Inside the bus, mothers carried babies on their laps. Traders balanced baskets of tomatoes. Students in clutched bags of books. The smell of fried plantain and kerosene filled the air. The driver shouted. The conductor banged the side of the bus, and soon they were on their way. As the bus moved, the boy pressed his face to the window. He watched the red soil of the village disappear, replaced by long stretches of road, fields, and towns. At each stop, hawkers shouted, Gala, pure water, bread, groundnut. For the first time, Obong felt the world was bigger than he had ever imagined. The first glimpse of Ibadan. Hours later, the bus climbed a hill. Obong looked ahead, and there it was, Ibadan. The city stretched wide, so many rusted roofs. The city stretched wide, with so many rusted roofs. Roads twisting like snakes, cars honking in every direction. The famous cocoa house towered above, proud and tall for a boy whose world had been mud huts and palm trees. It was like stepping into another planet. The noise struck him first. Drivers shouting, horns blaring, preachers yelling on street corners, hawkers balancing trays of oranges and puff. The smell struck him next. Roasted suya mixing with exhaust fumes, perfume mixing with dust. He clutched his bag tighter. His grandmother's words echoed in his mind, the city will test you. At the university gate, crowds of students bustled. Some wore expensive clothes, their accents polished. Others looked just as lost as him. He was given a small hostel room, 4 beds, one ceiling fan that creaked, and walls scribbled with names of students long gone. His roommates welcomed him. One from Lagos, loud and confident. Another from Benue, quiet and studious. And a third, a joker who made everyone laugh. That night, as he lay on his new bed, listening to the city's hum outside, he thought of home. He thought of his grandmother's fire. He thought of Amaka, the girl whose laughter still haunted his heart. But sleep came slowly, and when it did, it carried with it the dreams of a boy who had stepped into a world far bigger than his own. And so, Obong became a young man in the city of Ibadan, a city of books, of endless buses, of voices speaking faster than he could follow. He had come to chase his future. But in chasing the city lights, the fire of the village grew dim behind him. Classes began almost immediately. Lecturers spoke in English so fast, it felt like the words had grown wings. Some carried notes that stretched from floor to ceiling. Others spoke with authority, their voices booming like thunder. For the first few weeks, he struggled to keep up. He felt small, lost in a sea of students. But slowly, he found his rhythm. He stayed up late in the library, reading under the dim light, his eyes burning but determined. The city itself was another classroom. He learned how to cross busy roads without being crushed by taxis. He learned how to eat quickly in buka joints where the stew was fiery and the rice was plenty. He learned to say, I'm coming, even when he had no intention of moving. Money was never enough. His grandmother's savings could only carry him so far. Soon, he began to hustle. He sold second-hand books. He carried bags for market women at Bodija. Sometimes, he even washed clothes for wealthiest students in exchange for small coins. It was hard, but he told himself, one day this struggle will be my story. In Ibadan, Obong met people who opened his eyes wider than any textbook. There was Kunal from Lagos, sharp-tongued, always dressed in the latest fashion, who taught him the fast ways of city survival. Chinedu from Enugu, calm and book-smart, who became his study partner. And Bola from Osun, a joker whose laughter filled their small hostel room, making even the hardest days easier. Together, they shared food, shared struggles, and shared secrets. They were young, hungry, and chasing a future. At first, letters came from the village. His grandmother wrote in her shaky handwriting, telling him about the goats, the harvest, and the children who asked after him. Sometimes, tucked inside the envelope, was a small letter from Amaka, simple notes, how are you? We miss you at the stream. The mango tree is heavy with fruit this year. Each time he read her words, his heart tightened. But over time, the letters grew fewer, and when they did come, he found himself too busy, too tired, too distracted to reply. The city was pulling him forward. The village was slipping behind. With time, Ibadan began to reshape him. He was no longer the shy boy who walked behind a girl in silence. He was louder now, bolder. Girls in campus groups noticed him, his intelligence, his humor, his quiet determination, and liked hovering around him. He attended debates, joined societies, participated in school politics. He even played football matches that drew cheers. Slowly, his heart no longer ached for the laughter of the girl in the village. But sometimes, late at night, when the city finally grew quiet, he would remember Obong would close his eyes and hear her laughter, and in those moments, regret whispered at the edges of his soul. Years rolled by. He passed exams. He failed some too, but he pressed on, each failure sharpening his hunger. He told himself, I came here to make something of myself. Love can wait. The village can wait. My grandmother will understand. And so, step by step, Obong became a man of the city, his dreams burning bright, but his childhood fire growing dim. He had left the village with dreams burning in his chest. He had survived Ibadan's chaos, fought hunger, and tasted the sweet and bitter fruits of ambition. But time has a way of pulling even the strongest dreamers back home. And so, after years in the city, he returned to the village, carrying success in his hands, but a question in his heart. Would the village and the girl he once loved in silence still remember him? The bus rattled into the village one hot afternoon, dust rose, children shouted, goats scattered across the road. To him, everything looked smaller: the trees, the huts, even the market stalls. But the smell of roasted corn, the sound of pounding yam, the laughter of children those things never changed. His grandmother was older now, her back more bent, her steps slower, but when she saw him step down from the bus, she straightened, her face breaking into a smile. My son, you have come home. He knelt, tears stinging his eyes, as she placed trembling hands on his head, whispering blessings in the language of their ancestors. That evening, he walked the paths of his childhood. He passed the market where he once miscounted coins. He passed the stream where he had slipped on the rocks. He passed the fire pit where stories once burned bright under the moonlight. Everything was the same, and yet everything was different. Because he was no longer the boy who chased fireflies. He was a man who had seen the city lights. And then he saw her. A marker. She was standing by the mango tree near her family's compound, her wrapper tied around her waist, her hair neatly plaited. She looked older, but her eyes still danced. For a moment, time froze. He remembered every letter he had not replied to, every glance he had hidden behind friends, every dream that had pulled him away. A marker, he whispered. She turned, her lips parting in surprise. Their eyes met, and in that silence, years of unspoken words pressed between them. But then a man stepped out of the compound, holding a little boy by the hand. The child ran to Ada, calling, Mama, Mama. Obong's heart clenched. Ada was no longer his silent dream. She was another man's wife, another man's companion, another man's story. She smiled at him politely, warmly, but with distance.
Welcome back.
She said softly.
It has been a long time.
He forced a smile. Yes, a long time, he replied reluctantly. They talked about the weather, about the harvest, about the years that had passed, and about Ibadan, but not about what could have been. The door was closed, although he silently blamed her for not being a little more patient, for not waiting for him to hustle in the city so he could make a life for the both of them. He somehow knew he couldn't blame her for moving on. That night, as Obong sat by the fire with his grandmother and the village children, he felt a heaviness in his chest. The children laughed as she told the story of tortoise once again, the same story he had heard 100 times as a child, but tonight it carried a different weight. Once upon a time, she said, the tortoise thought he could trick everyone, but in the end, it was his own shell that broke. Obong stared into the flames and realized the city had given him knowledge, survival, and ambition, but it had also taken something away, a piece of innocence, a piece of love, a piece of home. Later, Obong walked outside. The fireflies danced in the night, just as they had when he was a boy. And for the first time in years, he let himself smile. Because though the girl was gone, though the years could not be reversed, the village was still here. The fire was still here. His grandmother was still here. And perhaps that was enough. So he sat there, between the fire of the past and the lights of the future, knowing that life is not about what we lose or what we gain, but about the stories we carry, the wisdom we pass on, and the roots that remind us where we began. The night was cool. The moon was bright, bathing the compound in silver light. The fire crackled, sending sparks into the dark sky. Children sat in a circle, legs crossed, faces glowing in the flicker. His grandmother was too old now. Her voice had grown weak. She nodded toward him and said, "Tonight, it is your turn. Tell them a story." Obong smiled. He picked up a stick, poked the fire, and began. Long, long ago, there was a boy who lived in a village. He sold pepper in the market. He played by the stream. He listened to stories by this same fire. He dreamed of the city, and one day, he left. The children leaned closer, wide-eyed. Obong told the children of Ibadan, the buses, the markets, the endless noise. He told them of hunger and hustle, of lectures that shook the ears, of friendships that saved him. He told them of laughter he once loved but lost. The children gasped, laughed, and even wiped tears as he spoke. To them, it was a story. To him, it was memory. And then he ended with the same words his grandmother had once told him. "My children, the world is wide, but do not forget where your umbilical cord is buried." One of the little boys raised his hand and asked, "Uncle, did you ever find happiness?" He looked at the boy, then at the fire for a long moment. He was silent, then he smiled. "Happiness," he said slowly, "is not in the city or the village. It is not in wealth or in fame. Happiness is in the stories we live, and the people who share our fire." When the children had gone to sleep, Obong sat by the dying fire. His grandmother sat beside him, her eyes heavy with age. "You see," she whispered, "the fire never dies. It only moves from hand to hand." He took her wrinkled hand in his and nodded, because he understood now his childhood was not lost. It had simply become the root of his story. And in that moment, with the fire glowing low and the crickets singing in the grass, he felt at peace. So ends the journey of the boy who chased fireflies, who walked the dusty markets, who dreamed of Ibadan, who loved and lost, who struggled and survived. His story is not just his own. It is the story of every child who leaves home in search of tomorrow. It is the story of every grandmother who raises a dream with firelight and wisdom. And it is a reminder that no matter how far we go, no matter what we gain or lose, the fire of home never truly dies. Like and subscribe for more.